Oh, okay. Cool.
But I'll move the hand.
All right.
All right. It might
Hello.
Move. Yeah, it might move from time to time. Next time, I'll have a tripod set up.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's what I've got a tripod sitting in front of my desk. It works wonders. But yeah, I was propping stuff up on books and against like those metal tumblers and everything until I finally dug up the old tripod.
You're like, this has got to go.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, the setting looks good. Looks professional.
Thank you. It's still in progress. I got a lot of bookshelves I need to actually fill in with books and tchotchkes and all that good stuff. So that's part of what this weekend's going to be devoted to. So yeah, by the next time we talk, it'll be fully operational, like the Death Star.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
should we officially begin?
Yeah, we're rolling, man. So
right.
So what? Tell me about this.
Okay, let me show you the poster with your name on it in my room.
Ooh.
Wait, can you see it?
Yep, there it is.
There we go. Bassett sent it to me from Chicago.
Oh, very cool.
That's the official one that was used in their theater. That's
great. Yeah, that was fun, man. And I'm looking forward to next year when you bring the sequel.
Yeah. Well, slow romance first.
Yes. Yeah. Well, let's talk about it because I saw. You've had a really busy, like crazy month. It sounds like because I got some notes on like different things we could talk about, and this could go on for like 3 hours, but probably keep it to an hour because we have to have stuff to talk about in the future. So I saw the test footage that you put out of Slow Romance with Kendra, and like right off the bat, it looked so different because I'm assuming because you were shooting it during the day, but are you shooting with a different camera than you shot Werewolf?
Oh no, I didn't do all of the post effects for that test footage. That was like way too much sunlight during the day. So ultimately the final footage will look similar to Werewolf.
Okay, because I was going to say it looked really cool. It was very bright and buttery is the only word that I can think of. But yeah, it looked really neat.
Thanks.
I like the music a lot. I was thinking I could watch an entire, you showed 3 minutes of it, but I was like, I could watch an entire movie of just this music with Kendra walking around the city and just her talking and having no idea what she's talking about.
Good. You've been recruited to the cult of slow cinema.
Yeah. So what was that? Just your banter kind of talking about while you were filming it, or was she reciting lines, or what was that? What was going on there?
We were just talking. I didn't even. I shot a bunch of video. I didn't even think that I would use that publicly, but I wanted to show what we were, working on. Show off one of the lead actors. So so I released it to the public. But yeah, we were just talking about the project. She was talking about how she felt about the location. She hadn't been there before. It's in a place called Brooklyn Promenade. You saw it with an amazing view of Manhattan. What we should do is in the info section for this discussion, we should put all the links to things that we talk about.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So people can go see the test footage.
Yeah, for sure. Because it really does look gorgeous. I mean, I'm curious to see what it's going to look like when it's all put together and everything. But just as a sample, I mean, it didn't look like you were just testing stuff out. It looked like an actual genuine little short. It was very cute.
That's what happens when you make movies for like 30 years.
Yeah. So tell me about you've cast both of your leads. So I was going to say they're not really leads because they're not leading anybody. It's a 2-person movie, right? So tell me about that.
It's not finalized yet. And also, if I'm being too loud, let me know. Sometimes
no,
way too loud. Second person is probably going to be Amir Motlagh. He's a filmmaker friend that I worked with screenings and whatnot over the last since about 2005, and he's LA based. So we have to figure, and he's busy with a bunch of things, but he's a good actor. He was in a movie I shot called Brooklyn Fantastic. That's not edited yet. That was shot in 2009. Also has Susan Bice in it from Four Eyed Monster. She became a little bit famous for that other project. So that previous thing from 2009 might be a short, and that'll be an extra on the DVD for Slow Romance. So we're going to try to get Amir. Hopefully by end of next week, we'll have everything finalized. If we can't get Amir because of scheduling, we'll try to get someone else. But yeah, he's made a bunch of movies, good actor. AmirMotlagh.com, I think. We'll post up the link.
Okay. And the script is almost done.
Yeah, a version of it is done. Let's be entertaining. I'll share a magical secret. So a few years ago, I read a review with Woody Allen. He was talking about Annie Hall. Someone asked, "How were you able to write it? How long did it take?" He's like, "Oh, it just all came to me all at once, the entire script." And I was like, no way is that possible. He's just being funny. But guess what? It's apparently a thing. So the entire first draft I wrote like in one sitting. But after thinking about it for like a month and collecting notes. So now I'm going back and writing the final drafts.
So how long was that sitting?
I think it was broken up over like 3-4 days. I mean,
okay.
I would write at night, and it was one weekend day also. But yeah, apparently after you try to write scripts for a long time, or you actually write scripts for a long time, your brain gets used to thinking in terms of 90 pages as opposed to like, one page. It was weird, but I liked it. Also, this is a simple two-person, it's basically two people talking. So it's, a lot easier to put together than like 10 characters.
Now you've kind of gestated with this idea and everything you want to put in the movie, and then it all kind of came out. So are the actors going to be involved at all in helping to shape these characters, or are you going to, like, I guess, are they going to have input as far as making them their own, or are they just going to be reading what you've exactly put down?
Oh no, I never do that. I finish the script. That's level one. Then you work with the actors to get the final characters and the final dialogue down. Usually most of the dialogue stays the same, but characters can add stuff. Actors can add stuff and fine-tune things. And like you saw in Werewolf Ninja Philosopher, what Art was able to do, Archer and Tawari, was not something I imagined in the script. So in the script, It just had the dialogue. Then he figured out, together, him and we figured out how to deliver it in a compelling way.
Cool. And you fully figured out how this one plays into the Werewolf Ninja Philosopher universe, huh?
So far, there's one shot of the werewolf from the movie just walking by an apartment. That's it.
That's all you need.
That's all you need.
That counts.
Like, he might be the third person we see besides the other two, and plus a lot of extras, people in the city who don't know they're being filmed.
So, do you have the specific locations and everything that you've picked out for these scenes? I mean, I'm not quite clear on the structure. You said it's very much like Before Sunrise, right?
Yeah.
Like the Linklater film.
Yeah. So there are two filmmakers. One, Kendra's character, Allison, is 25. Possibly Amir's character, or whoever plays that character, Renee, is 38, 39, 40. She is both are relatively well known as indie filmmakers, and but she's just got like a few movies done. He's got like 10 movies done, or number of I still haven't finalized, but a large body of work. So they meet on one day. They kind of know each other from the scene, and then they decide to go on some dates. And it ends up being about 9 dates, as I have it now, and then at the end of it, they decide to see each other more seriously.
Cool. Does one of them get horribly killed, and then they have to be investigated by a certain hairy detective?
No. I mean, for people who saw Werewolf Ninja Philosopher, they saw in that movie, they heard a little bit. A lot was left out. And there's sort of a culture of famous indie filmmakers in New York in that world. So this is two of those filmmakers. So had the werewolf not stopped the killer, yeah, maybe the killer would have gotten them.
Well, spoiler for Werewolf Ninja Philosopher. You just gave away that he stopped the killer.
Yes, it does stop the killer, but I think a lot of people, anyone who's watched Monk or any detective show, will guess that the main character stops the killer.
Sure. So as far as the the casting and all that, you were in the casting process last time we talked. So
yeah.
tell me a little bit about what it was that you saw in Kendra that why did she land the role?
Okay, hold on. Let me change my hands so that when my hands don't get sleepy. The shot is still okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, good. Let me get used to the new position. Got it. All right. So sorry about all the boxes. This is my workspace.
It's all right.
I'll clear it up. One day, this background will look like your background over there. So it'll be funny from like month to month. Our workspaces will change.
Yeah, it's evolution, man. It's great.
That's right. So my casting process is when I find the first right person, I stop and I go with that person. And if they don't turn out to be the right person, then I go back to the pool of applicants. So I interviewed out of 700 people who submitted. I chose based on experience. Kendra went to school for acting, American U, and also the cover letter, the way they look. Obviously, they have to, they need to have the potential to portray a certain character that I'm thinking about. And then the final, actually, one of the most important things is how I get along with them when I meet and talk with them. So I know that a lot of filmmakers, especially with stars, well-known actors, they just interview them. There's no audition process. They interview, see if they can get along, see if they're all on the same page. I mean, Jarmusch does that, Woody Allen does that, and then they hire them for the project. So I met up with a bunch of actors, and with Kendra, we hung out for like 4 hours, and she understood what the story is, and showing two people in their lives. So she seemed like she could do the job. So far, it's turning out to be a good choice.
Cool. So I don't know if we've talked about this, but why slow romance? What was it about this particular story, these 9 dates that you felt? That's all right. That you felt you had to tell, especially coming off of something as different as Werewolf Ninja Philosopher.
Yeah. So everything's good, right? The phone just changed position.
Oh, yeah.
But you're good. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So. One of the things I'm finding with the script when I'm writing the revisions to slow romance, even during the initial first draft, is I have to keep myself from going too absurd into the Werewolf Ninja Philosopher type territory, because it's very easy for me to come up with absurd humor. So this is more of the entertainment content, and this one is more like real people talking about real things, right? So that's a challenge. So I wanted to do something that was not so absurd in between the two absurd movies, between Werewolf 1 and Werewolf 2, just to show what else I could do. And certain subjects like religion, history, a little bit of politics, race, money, society, all that stuff can be better addressed in a realistic setting, as opposed to something like, a werewolf movie.
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because that makes sense. If you want to talk or comment on a lot of those big issues, it occurs to me the best way to do that, one of the best ways, is to have two people getting to know each other, especially over the course of 9 encounters, because especially today it seems like you meet people and everyone's so kind of like fractured and skeptical of one another, largely probably because of politics or gender politics, that it's almost like speed dating, right? You got to check off, like, what do you do? Who do you support? Where do you fall on this, and this? And then after you get through these, if you decide that someone is worthy of staying in your orbit, you get to know them more and more and more. and that's, I guess, how relationships happen, and possibly even romance. So yeah, it's a cool idea.
Oh, thanks. The other extreme is people hooking up through dating apps without, just primarily for sex, and then maybe some of those develop into actual relationships. So we have the two extremes. But slow romance, the idea was these two people are really busy, so they use the dates as a way to turn off their cell phones, hang out, enjoy New York, stuff like that. Also, you saw the style of Werewolf Ninja Philosopher, slow shots of the city. That lends itself well to the slow romance story. So visually, it'll look rich and it'll look appropriate. Even it may be color, but if it's color, it's going to be muted color. But most likely it'll be black and white, because black and white so far looks really good.
Yeah.
Also for Manhattan, Manhattan, Woody Allen movie that made New York look awesome. So, and that was released exactly 40 years ago.
Wow. I missed that. I don't think I realized. I watched Manhattan for the first time, I think, like 3 or 4 years ago. It might have even been longer. I was just completely blown away by, I'd always heard how much of a great New York movie that was, but yeah, I just was not prepared. One of my goals is to find a way to watch that on the big screen.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it'll come over there. I mean, the reason it's kind of a flawed work because of the underage romance, 40-year-old guy and a 17-year-old girl. We don't have anything like that in this update. So it's 25 and 40, which is, maybe more acceptable.
Yeah.
And it only became 25 because Kendra is 25. If the actress turned out 30, 35, that would have been fine. There was actually an actress who was in her mid-30s that was going to be the second choice, but Kendra was the better choice for now.
So you wrote with just the character in mind, and the age of the actress that you settled on, that you chose, that's what determines the age, right? So it could have been someone who was 35. Now, knowing that, do you go back and retool the script to, because there's a big difference in maturity and worldview and all that stuff potentially between someone who's 25 and someone who's 35. So did you have to adjust anything once you found Kendra?
Well, I got the idea for the movie. Then I hired Kendra. Then after hanging out with Kendra, I fine-tuned the script. So the script wasn't, by the time the first draft was written, Kendra was already on board.
Okay, I guess I should rewind that and or clarify and say the idea is that you were kind of kicking around in your head. You said there's like the month or so or more of these ideas kind of percolating, and they all came out in that magical 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Did finding Kendra have you reconsider any of those ideas, or have you naturally admitting stuff or fine-tuning stuff, so that when you were talking to her, it was perhaps a different conception than when you'd started out?
I knew since the actors are most likely going to be Kendra and Amir. When I wrote it, when I wrote the first draft, I wrote it with those two in mind. So obviously something that would be outside the scope of a 25-year-old's experience, I didn't put in the script, or at least not for Kendra's character. So what the character ended up doing was highly affected by who was going to play the character.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. The sound is kind of like a little bit muffled in parts. Is your hand over the? Say something.
Hello.
Perfect.
Good. I might have had some kind of a thing covering.
Yeah, it's possible. It's fine. You're coming through. It's just a little bit uneven. Okay. Cool.
Okay, so you want to talk about the critical stuff before we run out of time?
Oh, we got plenty of time, man. We got like 40 minutes, as long as you have time.
I have plenty of time.
Okay. No, I think that's a good idea. We can talk about. I was reading the New Yorker article that you had sent me by Richard Brody. Yeah. And there's some really interesting stuff.
Real life, he's a character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In a very good way.
Okay.
He has a beard and looks like an Old Testament prophet, and he walks around New York like just a regular guy, and he's very noticeable, from his photos, at least for film people. But
Mm.
really nice guy. I met him briefly. Matt Solerseist introduced me to him, and yeah. But I think visually, he strikes the pose. He's a very unique person.
Can you get him into one of the background shots of Slow Romance or Werewolf 2?
Depends. Maybe for Werewolf 2, if Slow Romance does well, Richard's like, hey, that's a good movie. I'll be like, all right, let's get you in it.
Awesome.
I mean, remember, you've seen Annie Hall, right?
Yes.
Yeah. One of my scenes in my head is I want to have two characters debating something maybe Matt Seitz wrote, and then pull Matt into the scene and say, that's not what I wrote at all.
It'll take place in a theater lobby too.
That's right.
So the piece that I read, it started talking about this thing. It was called a film modi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which if you read it really quickly looks like film audit, which still kind of works.
MAUDIT, is that French for something about death?
I'm not sure what I know a bit of French, but I'm not sure exactly what modi means.
Maybe it's like the thing you write after someone dies.
Oh, like a
obituary?
Obituary, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll have to look at it. Anyway, people who know French are probably laughing at us saying, "Look at these two idiots."
Well, yeah, but they're probably thinking that anyway.
Yeah,
but I love the French.
they're always correct.
Yes, always. But so the idea of this piece, or what it started off with, was sort of the challenge to pick a couple of movies that the critics believed would be like kind of unrecognized in their time, but destined to be future classics. And I know one of them is an example was Heaven's Gate, and the other was Ishtar, which kind of raised my eyebrow. I know there's been some appreciation for Ishtar since it came out, but an unappreciated classic? I don't know. Now, full disclaimer, I've never seen Ishtar. That's one of my blind spots. You've never seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
Ooh.
Because I heard all the negative things about it, probably.
Maybe that's something we should do for one of our upcoming things is watch Ishtar independently and then talk about it.
Maybe for episode 10 when we are done with more pressing items.
What's more pressing than Ishtar, man? But
a million things more pressing.
Okay, fair enough. But so it evolved into this kind of a greater conversation about film criticism and film culture, and what does it mean in the age where everybody's writing about movies and everyone is discovering movies and putting them out, either these kind of boutique film distributors or putting out Blu-rays or things coming online. And then you run into the problem of, something's obscure and it's a big deal to finally be able to see it, but the obscurity is pretty much the only redeeming quality of it. It was a fascinating piece, and it really got me thinking about, what I do. And we had talked a little bit, I think, in our last conversation, or maybe it was the first time that we spoke, about the overabundance of content and how it's hard to just settle down and decide what's important to watch. Obviously, Ishtar is not at the top of that list. But what was your key takeaway from reading that piece?
Now, I thought I had sent you a different piece about how critics can select. There's another piece by Brody where he wrote, critics don't necessarily have to review, and part of that might be at the bottom of the article that I sent you. They don't necessarily have to review movies that are being released in theaters by the studios. They have the power to choose unknown indie films and make them something important. So that idea I'm really into. I think one of the problems, production is no longer a problem, but one of the problems still, as someone who distributes movies and shows movies, distribution is super expensive. Marketing to let an entire city know that your movie is playing is super expensive. So one role critics can play is, yeah, they should just not write about, the 52 releases or times five or whatever that Hollywood puts out, but they should, they have the space and the platform to look at anything anyone is releasing and see, oh, is this worth using my platform to push up, So I think
Yeah,
that's an area where critics and indie filmmakers would probably agree on. They can sort of work together.
yeah, and I think there are.
One more thing,
Okay.
as a filmmaker who submits to critics, a lot of critics are not interested in writing about your movie unless it's playing in your city, being distributed by a major studio, blah blah blah, because that's the way that they're used to doing things, and they have a backlog of those major movies to review.
Yeah, and that is sort of one of the problems. I know there are critics who are more into covering the indie stuff and even the obscure things that aren't necessarily getting the big push.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are also folks who concentrate mostly on the mainstream because frankly they work for publications who you
Yeah,
can write about Werewolf Ninja Philosopher or you can write about Avengers 19.
obviously you should write about Werewolf Ninja Philosopher.
Well, I mean that's I'm beholden to no one, so
Yeah,
I say why not write about both?
sure.
But I mean, I get emails, several emails a week from people, not only studios, but also publicists who are trying to get lesser known films out there, and then sometimes just from filmmakers who are like, well, I've got a film showing at Siskel this weekend. You want to check it out? And I'm like, okay, sure. Sometimes I don't have the bandwidth or the
Yeah.
emotional energy to,
Well,
to even do that.
plus it's a financial commitment for an indie critic, right? I mean, you're not being paid by a publication. So I think that's another interesting subject. There is a massive, sizable indie film economy. Like there's like 3,000 indie film festivals in the U.S. Let's say they make 1,000 movies, 1,000 indie movies a year, indie filmmakers features. The number's probably much higher, probably like 5,000. Let's say each spends $10,000 on making that movie, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like $10 million right there. So the money does get spent, but none of it is really going to film critics who are independent, right? It's going to making the movie, getting it out, distribution, blah blah blah. So I think in the future there needs to evolve a system where uh, like I mean, Film Thread does a little bit of it, and I'm trying something similar with one of the critics for Big Easy magazine, Bill Arceneaux. Anyway, there needs to be a system where a filmmaker can submit their movie to be reviewed, and they pay a fee, not for the outcome, but for the just to cover the time that it takes to take a look and write the review. And the critic could say, listen, if I hate the movie and I don't want to review it, or I know I'm gonna trash it, I'm gonna decline the project, and that's that, right? I spent 2 hours figuring it out, right? So something like that needs to evolve, where uh, otherwise critics won't have the time to review the actual indie stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I'm wondering how that would work because if you send me your movie and there's
Yeah.
this service involved and it's like $25 or something, I don't know what it would be. And the deal is like if I watch it and I decide I'm not going to cover it, then you don't pay me or you pay me a fraction of it or something.
No, it's like film festival submissions. When you submit, you pay.
Okay.
So a filmmaker would need to know about the critic beforehand. Like, if someone loves Michael Bay movies, I'm not going to submit them, right?
Well, not necessarily, because it would be a very interesting system to set up because you'd have to, I guess, curate the critics because there are people out there who can appreciate Michael Bay, even ironically,
Right.
who perhaps would love to watch Werewolf Ninja Philosopher.
This is true.
Uh, it could almost be like an Uber profile or something, like where you can,
Yeah.
figure out what kind of driver. Do you get the driver who likes to talk, or do you want the driver who doesn't say anything except, here we are? That kind of a deal.
Yeah, someone might put that together because a lot of people are putting together apps for all kinds of services. But because Amazon and Netflix and YouTube and Vimeo VOD exist, and people still watch stuff on DVD and Blu-ray, and people are going to keep making movies, even if the chances of distribution are slim, and people are going to keep reviewing movies because they feel that's their art form and they're really into it, right? So money and productivity exist, but it just hasn't been put together yet. One easy solution is every critic that has a website to say, if you want me to review your movie and it's not being distributed through the normal channels, you can submit, here's the fee, and I'll let you know if I'm going to review it. Film Thread does something like that. And I'm trying something similar with Big Easy Magazine. They're a New Orleans-based magazine that some friends of mine run. And their critic liked Werewolf a lot. So, and they're doing a fundraiser, Indiegogo. I'll give you the link. So
Yeah.
one of the perks we created was for a $50 donation, 20 of it goes to the critic and 30 to the magazine for their fundraiser. For a $50 donation, that critic Bill Arceneaux will take a look at the movie and do a capsule review, which is a short review. But in actuality, the one movie that he reviewed through that process, he ended up writing a lot on it, like 2 blog posts, et cetera, et cetera. He ended up finding the movie very interesting. So, and that's a movie that one would have never crossed his path otherwise, because I told a filmmaker friend, hey, submit to this guy, here's the process. He's never heard of the critic before. The critic had never heard of the filmmaker before. So it's actually one of Amir's movies. And it's an unusual movie. It's sort of a music video, but a feature length, called Rainbow Season. And if you Google it, you'll see Bill's reviews, and and they're interesting. He published in Medium, and I think he published somewhere else, maybe just on Medium, the review for Rainbow Season. Bill Arceneaux, I'll get you the spelling. ARC. It's from New Orleans.
No, it's funny because he's got the same last name as one of my son's former school teachers.
So you know.
Yeah.
There's an X in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, speaking of independent publication, again with this is sort of related to the kind of things both of us. I mean, I'm doing my indie distribution company. You're doing your indie reviews. So Big Easy Magazine got into the national spotlight a couple of days ago because they wrote a story about Drew Brees, the Saints quarterback.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
I had heard that Drew Brees was on the news. I didn't hear what it was. It's that's a name I heard for a while.
So the people at Big Easy found out that Drew Brees recorded a Bring Your Bible to School promo, but for Focus on the Family, which is anti-LGBTQ conservative religious group going back since the 70s.
Oh yeah, I know them.
Yeah, so people are like, that's crazy. Why would Drew Brees, who's friends with gay people and friends with Ellen, do this, right? So they wrote an article. It got picked up by national media. A lot of people in New Orleans got upset, saying they're attacking the local hero. But then Drew Brees is like, I have no idea. Focus on the Family hates gay people, right? Maybe he did. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't know. But anyway, at least now he knows not to associate with that group.
Yeah.
So amazing things can happen through indie media. I mean, one of the problems was that story was obvious to, a lot of people were talking about it in New Orleans, but no one would touch it because there's so much money involved with the Saints advertising, local advertising. So you have to have indie media to ask difficult questions.
Yeah, totally. And I like this idea of this program that you're talking about. You'd have to be very careful about setting it up and everything because, it could be very easily, I guess, corrupted. So you're essentially paying a critic for coverage. I think the filmmaker
Well,
would have to understand that the review could be negative, right?
yes. Well,
Like you
well,
could
I
pay
mean,
$50 to have someone rip apart your movie.
yeah. Well, but that's always the risk when submitting a movie to any critic, right? Paid or not. But also, we are keeping the submission at a low level. It's not like $3,000, right?
Oh, sure.
Where it looks like you're buying the critic, right? So yeah, of course, it's going to be risky. I think of it just the way that film festival submissions work. There's no guarantee that your film will get in, but
Yeah.
you have to submit, and they have to take the time. They have to pay someone, or it costs money for them to, or time to take a look at your movie. So, and critics used to get paid through the newspapers or the media outlet, right? Now, a lot of people are not employing critics. They're all independent. So there has to be some way where the critics get paid for their time, but not for the outcome of the, of the review. But it'll be obvious if it's a bought review. If someone loves a horrible movie, obviously there's something unusual is going on. Then again, someone like Richard Brody, he sometimes loves movies that all of the critics hate. So there's that.
Yeah, and I've certainly been in that boat before. So I really think it's a cool idea, and it is a way of sort of bridging this economic gap. Whereas,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it used to be there's a lot of paid gigs for critics. I think one of the reasons there's not anymore is because there's so many damn critics now. I think there was a story about Rotten Tomatoes in their recent, as recent as of last year, but I think this is the second class, the 2019 class that has been embraced the idea of opening up the floodgates of inclusion and diversity. Their new class is like 600 critics strong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many critics there are on Rotten Tomatoes, but that seems like a lot of new voices. So, and a
Are
lot
you
of
on?
those, no,
Okay.
no.
That other guy
I
I
sub.
mentioned, Bill Arceneaux, he is on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's cool. Yeah, I submitted last year and I didn't submit for this year. I can't remember if there's a cutoff or not. It's one of
Yeah.
those things where it was kind of on my agenda to do and it just slipped by because I'm doing like
Oh,
three
yeah.
podcasts a week. um,
No.
but no, it's the idea that I think the idea of a professional critic has changed a lot, even since I got into the game almost 10 years ago. You can be a professional critic and never been paid a dime for your criticism. A lot of it is reach, and how big an audience you can, advertising, how big an audience you can build, and that kind of stuff. And I imagine the same thing is kind of true for independent filmmakers. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you've got a lot of people who there's a large pool of folks who can make their own content. The crossover with filmmakers and film critics is the phone, the device we're talking on, the internet.
Yeah.
There's no reason you can't go out and shoot something and then write a review of it if you want to, all in an afternoon.
Well, I mean,
Um,
yeah, filmmaking is like 10 times harder because there's gazillion other things besides just writing, right? Not that writing
oh
is not
yeah,
difficult. So I think that's why you don't see, even at this point, you don't see like unbearable amount of great movies come out, right?
hmm
There's a lot of
well,
movies coming out, but it's not like every movie is great that it's worth your time.
sure. But my point is like the technology that has made it easier for filmmakers to make and get their films out there. You can quote unquote distribute something by putting it up on the internet, and
True.
if it catches fire, millions of people can see it in the first week, or no one sees it for 5 years.
True.
And the same thing with the film critics. 10, 15 years ago, you might put out like a physical newsletter or, like a blog post or something,
Yeah.
and no one saw it. But
IndieWire and Film Threat started as physical zines.
yeah,
Wait, Film Threat, IndieWire, no. Film Threat, yes.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I'm just saying that the technology, and it's still evolving. I mean, you can get YouTube Studio on your phone. So what we're shooting right now, I can add music, I can add edits, I can do all of this stuff, and within a couple hours, yeah, it's not going to look as professional and slick as what you do, over the course of several weeks with more sophisticated equipment, but
Yeah.
it's legit media.
Oh yeah, it could compete with like anything that a TV station puts out.
Hmm. So yeah, but I like the democratization of media. I think it's great to have more voices in, but on the other hand, it does just create this wider pool that everyone's constantly vying it for the attention of eyeballs that are distracted by a million other things. So it's harder to stand out, whether
Yeah,
you're
well,
writing about movies or making them.
yeah, well, I mean, the present is the present. We can't turn back the clock on the technology, so we have to embrace it. And
Hmm.
out of the two options, I would rather have people being able to be productive without a lot of money, making low budget movies, being able to write and publish, or make videos and publish, than how things were 20 years ago, where only an elite, selected and or backed by high finance, can become a film critic and can make movies. I
Yeah.
think we'll get used to the new normal, and then we'll find ways to get people paid.
Yeah, and I wonder what this is going to do to, I mean, the Hollywood movies, the ones at the top of the mountain, because I mean, we had kind of an abysmal summer. You've got these multi-$100 million movies that just tanked and did not resonate at all with the audiences. Um, are those budgets going to get slashed, or are they just going to keep persisting and saying, "Well, we've got the next Titanic, or the next Avengers Endgame is just around the corner. Just hold on." Um, I don't know. And
Well,
one thing,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No,
So,
you first.
okay, thank you. So I think people used to look at entertainment, filmmaking, and distribution as like sort of a vertical building. You have underground movies, you have low budget movies, and you have high budget movies. I think because of the web, and also the new technology, like I can make a movie for 10,000 and post it up. I mean, show it at a theater that last week showed Avengers Endgame. I mean, theoretically, right? So, now, right now, I think the market is sort of like a flat land. You have in one corner you have Avengers Endgame, and in another corner you have Werewolf Ninja Philosopher made for very little money, and you have someone shooting just their life and turning it into a movie. So I think Hollywood Hollywood is never gonna go back to the how it was in the '60s where they dominated the entertainment industry.
Yeah. Now, although they're gonna try, I think,
Well, yeah,
especially
I mean,
because
if they're not going to, they're going for big paydays, putting all their money in Star Wars and Avengers. They're not making $1 million movies. They're not making $10 million movies. They're making $100 million movies. So if that strategy turns out to be a loser, then they'll be like, okay, let's make some $5 million movies like we used to, and make 100 million and call it a day. Let's see. And new companies will come up. Uh, there's always in every decade, there's always investors who think they can crack Hollywood, and they're gonna, spend their money trying to do it. So we'll see.
yeah, and there are some exceptions, I think, even today with Blumhouse. I mean, their budgets seem to get a little bit bigger every year, but they're still comparatively low budgets, and they have returns that match the big competition. So
Mm-hmm.
but that tends to be genre filmmaking, right? I mean, I think it'd be neat to see that model with the true indie spirit, not independent spirit awards kind of stuff, but like
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
indie spirit of filmmaking.
Actual
Yeah,
real indies. Amir's movies, my movies, other people like us.
yeah, something like the old Miramax model,
Yeah, yeah.
taking the Weinsteins out of the the equation. But is that? Do you see that as being possible?
Yeah, it's possible because it's as I've figured out and I've seen amongst some people who've made it happen. You need about 3,000 hardcore fans or fans who will buy your stuff a few times a year to make maybe 100,000, 200,000 a year. So a lot of people are already making real money. 100,000 is nothing for Hollywood, but for a regular American, 100,000 is quite a bit of money, right?
That's
So
that's
there's
that's a year you can live on while
yeah,
you make
there,
movies. Yeah.
yeah, there's already a whole bunch of people making money through the new technology, through the new distribution systems, through crowdfunding, through Twitter, and the combination. So yeah, it's going to be more and more the case that uh, filmmakers at every level will be independent and they'll make money through internet self-distribution and using inexpensive technology.
Now, one thing I want to ask about is, just as an independent film critic, I have a hard time doing everything that's involved with just doing podcasts each week, from communicating with publicists to recording, editing, putting stuff out on social media. But it's probably nothing compared to what you have to go through in terms of like putting a movie together and getting distribution and showing stuff in different cities around the country. How do you keep up with all of that? Do you have to section off your day like, okay, this is the 3 hours where I'm going to do all the ancillary stuff to actual filmmaking, or do you just roll it all into one really long, exhausting day?
It's usually one really long day where I have to work on fundraising, client work, dealing with the theater, and getting things out to theater for screenings, getting things out to publicist or a reviewer. But depending on how often I'll be doing it, eventually I can hire some people for certain projects and have them handle that, and I can just oversee it. So essentially, the filmmaker becomes a distribution company, marketing company, a publicist. Same thing with you. If suddenly things take off and you're getting lots of money and there's a lot of from your criticism work and there's a lot of work to be done, then you'll naturally hire people to do some of that work that you don't want to do or that
Now,
you don't have the time to do.
right. So out of all that ancillary stuff, is there anything that you would gladly give up, or do you love aspects of it? Would you miss it if it was gone?
Well, if you're doing it on a small scale like I am, and you need things to be done a certain way, uh, the system I'm doing it now, where I'm doing everything with some help ever so often, ensures that things get done a certain way. I've ran into problems in the past where I've hired a publicist. They didn't contact the critics properly. I mean, they don't know how to sell an ultra low budget, no star movie. So I've repeatedly had to take over the publicity work. So now I try to do everything myself. But for distribution and marketing, yeah, I could use, if there's a budget and a good team, I'll definitely hand some of that work over, because there's a lot of people to contact. Even in New York, there's like 100 people to contact.
Now, who are those 100 people? Like, what are they all doing?
100 media outlets. That could include people with blogs to the New York Times. And some places need follow up. They need additional material. They have questions. So it becomes quite a lot of work.
So is there an imbalance there? Would you say you have to spend more time doing the non-creative portion of it than the actual creative? I mean, I know you work pretty fast and everything, so maybe that's not a problem, but do you wish that you, as far as what you're passionate about, is it kind of a grind sometimes to have to do all the housekeeping stuff?
Well, no, I think all artists, filmmakers, and musicians, and even Hollywood, the amount of time you spend making the art is small compared to the amount of time you spend fundraising, putting it together, distribution, and marketing. A film could take up 3 to 5 years easily, from script to end of distribution, first wave of distribution. Actual filming might be like a month or two. So
right.
That's just the nature of the work. That's also why you're not going to have, 20,000 movies that are good coming out every year. It takes a tremendous amount of commitment to keep making movies, even if you're getting paid, top dollar, because it's so time consuming.
Yeah, and I imagine that, especially in the studio system where you're attached to not just one movie, but you're responsible for a slate of films, it becomes product, right? There's probably corners being cut and things being made formulaic and all that just to get it out so you can meet a release date and market demands, which is, to your point, probably why we don't have 20,000 really good movies every year.
Yeah.
They're essentially the Impossible Whopper. It's just, the same thing we had last year, except with some new branding slapped on it.
Yeah, so that's why we have room for indie filmmakers who are making new content and critics who can spotlight. I mean, if you're not in the Hollywood system, you're not going to get the Hollywood exposure in media coverage, press, and marketing. But if we have smart critics looking for interesting things that are coming out, being done by people who are not in the system, then that stuff will come to the light. People in the public will hear about it. At least, that's one of the ways. So that's why I think the, filmmakers and critics working together will end up happening, because or small distribution companies and critics working together to some degree will end up happening because it's necessary.
Do you think it could be at some point sort of a reluctant alliance? I mean, you'd have to have, in order to put this together, I imagine you have to have film critics and filmmakers putting the system together, like cooperating.
Well, it already exists with the studios and critics.
Well, I think that's more about like access to a certain point, right? I mean, if you are a publicist or a studio and you're offering a critic a chance to, see a movie early and write about it, that's great. They're not getting paid. They might be getting paid by an intermediary or something, like the Tribune, say. But I'm talking about if you're going to come up with a system where you've got the filmmakers agreeing to pay the critics and all that.
Submission free, yeah.
Yeah.
I think some people will be motivated, because if you can make an extra $20,000 reviewing indie movies that you would review anyway had you heard about it, why not do it?
True. I guess I just wonder if there's a potential, and there's always a potential for this because it's sort of open and you're going to have a lot of gems and you're going to have a lot of junk. But if you've got a critic who's, getting bombarded with all these people who want to pay them $20-$25 or whatever the amount is, and the critic hates all of their movies.
but you can pre-screen, right? You could say, this is what I review, this is what I like, typically. So, send me an email about your thing, and I'll let you know to submit or not.
So it kind of goes back to that Uber thing I was mentioning earlier. You have to put out like your own resume. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I tend to review positively, and here's the stuff I tend to review negatively. Enter at your own risk, kind of a deal.
Well, this whole thing that I'm talking about already exists. Publicists don't take their project to a reviewer that they know will hate the project. They don't take the project to a media outlet that they know will hate the project. They try to target, people that will give them favorable coverage. Obviously, if something's major, every outlet will cover it because it's being released in 3,000 theaters, and the public expects them to cover it. But everything else, the studios and publicists and filmmakers are always channeling the work towards favorable reviews.
See, that's not been my experience. But then again, I tend to work with publicists in the context of the big studio films. Yeah. They want eyeballs to see it. They want the feedback. And I've talked to some publicists because I've felt that reluctance, not a sense that I need to review something positively. If Disney says, oh, you can see the new Avengers movie a week before everybody else, or the new Star Wars movie 2 weeks before everyone else, they're probably hoping that access will grant them favorable reviews, but they also understand that some people are going to hate it. And I have had that conversation with publicists where I'm like, I feel bad having to send you a review of a movie that, I just I tore apart, because they have to send that on. And the publicist has told me no one takes it personally at the studio. Like, they just want to know that the movie is being talked about. They want to see links because it's a business, like we were talking about. It's someone's job, just as the publicist's job, to send that information to the studio. It's someone's job at the studio to collect that information, send that to their boss and say, hey, look, we had a screening the other night and 60 critics showed up and we got, 35 responses that we solicited. next time I'll try and get 40, even if they're terrible. They just want to see those numbers, right?
Yeah, that's a different. I mean, the world of distribution and criticism has many layers, right? So the goals of a studio like Disney is different than someone like Zeitgeist or someone who puts out smaller movies. But
Mm-hmm.
essentially, no one really wants bad reviews from the angle of people who release movies.
And I imagine that's because if you solicit to a filmmaker and they give it a bad review, or sorry, a film critic, that critic is likely going to post that review on their outlet, whether it's a big time newspaper or a blog. That negative feedback is out there, and even if it's not like a blurb, it's still someone looking up at the internet. Hey, I heard about this movie, and they're going to see that bad review or that Slate review. So I guess I can see where you're coming from about being very selective as to who you send your stuff to. It's almost a calculation, like I'm going to send this to someone that I think is going to be friendly to the kind of film I've made, in the hopes that even if it's a lukewarm positive review, it's going to be better than this is terrible.
Yeah, well, you haven't worked in the other end where the filmmaker talks to the publicist. So that's one of the first things we discuss. When a filmmaker hires a publicist and the publicist takes on the project, the indie filmmaker, they take a look at the movie and they say, all right, so this is who we think will favorably respond to this. Then the filmmaker, the client, goes yes or no, submit. So
have you ever heard?
That's how it is on the other end. So by the time the filmmaker approaches the critic, it's a different conversation. But no one wants to submit willingly submit to a critic who's going to say this movie is horrible. Don't go see it.
Right. Which, I mean, I get that calculation, but it's kind of unfortunate because, I mean, I've been surprised by any number of movies in the past, from independent films to, major blockbusters that I thought were going to be terrible or great. It's because film criticism, just like filmmaking, is never a static thing. You're constantly able to be surprised and have your entire worldview changed by, transformed by a piece of art. So if a month ago I was not the kind of person that you'd want to submit your film to, that story might have completely changed and you'd have no idea because you didn't engage with me because of that fear, which is a reasonable fear in this context.
But I don't think it'll be a real problem because so many people make movies and so many people will submit that a track record develops. Like if I'm going to submit to Richard Brody, I already know, what he's covered, how he approaches things. So same thing with you. If someone wants to send you their movie, they'll look you up and say, what's the likelihood that they'll like it? I mean, if it's a studio that doesn't care, that just want X number of people to review it, that's a different kind of business. But if it's a small studio that wants a positive review, they'll be like, all right, should we submit or not?
Yeah.
But I mean, that'll, on the bright side, that'll save you from having to look at lots of things that you're going to hate.
Well, that's the thing. With very few exceptions, even movies that I've hated, I haven't regretted the experience of watching it. I can only think of a couple of movies where I was like, that was a waste of time, and I walked away angry. But
Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me at Aspen Hill Dollar Theater.
I still, I have not watched one frame of Twin Peaks. That's something that I need to explore, because I know a lot of people are big into it. Not so much Fire Walk with Me, but the TV series for sure.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste. Is there main things that we're running out of time, right?
Yeah, I mean we're casual, coming up on the hour. Yeah.
Okay, so there are other major things we need to cover before the time ends.
No, I mean we're not in therapy. It's okay.
Maybe we are in therapy.
Oh, well, okay. So next time we talk, so next month, this set will have changed to be a couch behind me, my feet up. But no, I think that's we've covered quite a lot of ground here, and I really like this.
Go ahead.
I'm saying I really like this idea that we're talking about with this system that you're kind of experimenting with. So you gotta keep me posted on how that all goes.
Well, when we did a fundraiser for Space Rabbit, Matt Seist offered capsule reviews, which he's working on now to finish by the end of the year. I think 200 people, no, something like 200 people submitted at $20
Wow.
for capsule reviews. So that's quite a bit.
That's crazy. Now,
Yeah.
was there a promise of like a time limit?
No,
Like,
but I mean, each time wise, it's all time because because of some family issues. Time is out. It was supposed to be done within a year. It wasn't done, but it'll be done by the end of the year. But everyone's cool with it. But uh, but a restriction Matt put on it was that those reviews could not be used for promo purposes because he writes for outlets that
oh,
yeah, because he didn't want the side project to compete with the companies that pay him to write reviews, right? So
sure.
so that's one. Each critic will have their own restrictions. But with the Big Easy magazine, Bill Arceneaux version of it, capsule reviews, yeah, they can be used however you want.
Well, when I was talking about time, I meant like if you've got 200 people paying for this tier for the fundraiser, and they're
Yeah,
putting in $20 to have their movie reviewed, and
yeah,
then a capsule written about it, like
yeah,
that's a big commitment. Like
yeah,
if you
yeah.
watch a movie a day, it would still take 200 days to get through all the submissions, right?
Well, it was supposed to be a capsule review, and it's sort of uh, for that one, it was just like a blurb and TV guide or something. This is what it is, and then he can write more if he wants. But it was more for entertainment purposes. Like you can submit someone's home movie, you can submit a wedding video, you can submit a '70s episode, of like of I don't know, a Three's Company. I don't know, just to get Matt's reaction to it. So it wasn't really a business thing. But the thing I'm talking about for the future, uh, that is more for film distribution, for film discovery, and to get critics paid for their work.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, again, we'll have to talk about this again, maybe next month or as things shape up. But yeah, it's a cool idea, man.
Okay, one thing. We didn't cover anything about the world. What what subjects? Religion, race,
Oh,
money. What do you want to talk about? Oh, one thing that I thought about is Asia is huge. Like more than half of the human population lives in Asia. It's insane. It's almost like that's the central event in human civilization, and everything else is just like sideshows. Even though every country looks at their own news and thinks their country is the most important thing.
I don't know. I'm going to push back on that because every time I look at the news coming out of America, I think it's a sideshow. Uh,
Okay.
so yeah, I don't know how to respond to that. I've never, I haven't been abroad much. I've been to Europe a couple of times. Probably when the kids are older, I'll do some more world traveling with my wife because there's definitely a lot of cool places I'd like to see. But yeah, it is funny how it's like that. The minority population ends up having the dominant cultural impact in a lot of ways. Um, Although we are seeing that shift. I mean, you look at Hollywood. A lot of the studios are being bought up by Chinese
Yeah.
entities, and a lot of the movies now are being tailored to the Asian market. So you are seeing that influence there. So I don't know. I don't have much to say about the state of globalism or money or politics. I mean, it's a Friday night and it's like 9 o'clock, so I'm
There we
I'm
go.
I'm I'm winding down from the week. But let's
Sounds good.
let's open with world politics next week or next month.
Yeah, it'll be the philosophy subject. By the time we talk next month, hopefully I'll be shooting or about to shoot we're slow romance.
That's exciting.
Thank you.
So
Getting things done.
yeah, I can't wait. All right, so yeah, I don't know if it'll be a month from tonight, but we'll do right around this time. We'll
Roughly
do it a month.
at the same time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we'll call it First Fridays. Yeah.
First Fridays. Well, roughly around 9/6, whatever day, or 10/6, whatever day that falls on. And
Yeah.
I'll send you links related to Big Easy magazine, the capsule reviews, whatever else that we talked about.
Yeah, it'll all be in the description. That's awesome.
Awesome. This is a fun thing. I think this is
Yeah,
the first time a filmmaker and a critic are having a regular discussion on the web.
yeah, I love it, and hopefully neither of us will get in trouble.
Yeah, let's hope not. If we do, that'll be part of the show. The viewership will go up.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Thanks again,
Okay.
and
Thanks
yeah,
a
we'll
lot.
talk later. All right, bye.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye.